didn't lean up against the... It's Balaram. Okay, so we have two things today. I don't know if we're going to try to get through it. Today's the appearance day of Jiva Goswami and also the appearance day of Vamana Dev. So we have a little bit of time split between the two. Jiva Goswami, Krishna's glorification of his devotees he likes more than glorification of himself. It's considers higher. When you glorify his devotees, you glorify Krishna simultaneously. Sanatana Goswami explains that when his devotees are glorified, it enhances the glorification of Krishna. So, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Navalabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Navalabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajagana Ranjana Brajagana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajagana Ranjana Nandana Brajagana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Prabhacharya Acharya Sri Mata's Divine Grace H.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Gauda Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sakoshi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Vaita Gadadhar Shri Vasati Gauda Bhaktivinoda Ki His confounder Srila Prabhupada Ki Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mayapur Dham Ki Navadvip Dham Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Ganga Maya Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakta Devi Ki Shri Radha Golokananda Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So we're going to start with Jiva Goswami. And then we'll try to split the time in half if we can do that. So we're just we're not going to be able to get into either one of them in depth. We just kind of overview. So Jiva Goswami is considered the Tattva Acharya. That he's the explainer of the truth, and we'll get into that here a little bit. There was in all literatures there's Sambandhana, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Sambandhana is the relationship, and Abhideya is the process, and Prayojana is the goal. And they all have their representation. The goal is represented by Raghunath Das Goswami, and the process is represented by Rupa Goswami, and the relationship is represented by Sanatan Goswami. And then Jiva Goswami is considered a Tattva Acharya and the representative of the truth. So he, as a young, Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami were his uncles, and his father was Anupama, and he was the youngest of the three brothers. But he left his body soon after they started their association with Lord Chaitanya, Sanatan, and Rupa Goswami. But Jiva Goswami was at home, and he's from, it's described he was from West Bengal, at Ramakeli. And from his early childhood, he was attached to, worshiping Krishna. And once he reached the age of around 20, he had heard that his uncles had left their service with the Shah, or the king they were serving. And they had left and joined Lord Chaitanya's movement. And at the age of 20, his mother dies. And so at this point, there's an opportunity for him to leave. So there's no really, almost everything we have about Jiva Goswami comes from the Bhakti Ratnakara. It's a book that was given to us by Narahari Chakravarti. And this book it's primarily about Jiva Goswami. It's about Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, Shyamananda, Rasikananda. It's got Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. It's like a couple of chapters in there about Nityananda's wife, Jahnavi, about the ceremonies they had, and then also about the book distribution. Jiva Goswami is also known as like the first book distributor, because all the literatures that were written by the Goswamis, he had Narottam Das Thakur and Shivananda Sain and Shyamananda take those books and deliver them. That's a whole separate story. That's all from the Bhakti Ratnakara. Of course, the books were stolen, but then they were gotten back. But then the books were handwritten, so then if you want a copy, you got to either pay somebody to copy it, rewrite you a copy, or you copy it yourself. So this is how the books were distributed. So there's nothing, I think, in any literature that he had any association with Lord Chaitanya. But when he left home, he went to Navadvip, and he got the association of Nityananda. And so they did parikram together, and they went around to all the holy places of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And then at one point, Nityananda suggested that he go to Vrindavan, but first he go finish his studies. He go to Benares and study Sanskrit and become proficient in that, and then he could join his uncles. So that's what he did. He left and went to Benares after he studied. He joined his uncles in Vrindavan. So he stayed under the tutelage of his two uncles, Rupa and Sanatan. And so he first approached Sanatan to get initiated. But due to his humility, he said, no, you should approach Rupa, my brother, and get initiation from him. But Rupa Goswami wanted to test him first before he just gave him initiation. So he had him doing like menial tasks, and sometimes going out and collecting rice and stuff as donations, cleaning, and these types of things that he asked him to do to test his sincerity. And so eventually he gave him initiation. So we have a number of literary contributions from Jiva Goswami. He took and often edited the books of Rupa and Sanatan. He would correct some grammar and behavior, some grammar in the writings. And we have a lot of literature, but even the Srimad Bhagavatam, like in the digital copy, there's what has Prabhupada's purports. It has Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purports. Then it has Jiva Goswami's commentary, and then it has Sanatan. It's kind of in reverse order of the chronological order. It would be Sanatan was first to do his commentaries, and then Jiva Goswami, actually his commentaries were taken from Sanatan Goswami, and lots of times they're almost identical with some corrections and some additions. If you read them, you'll see that those two are the same. And similarly, Prabhupada used Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. And then the disciples, Srirananda Goswami, and they also used heavily on his, when they did the translations. I know I did a class in New Vrindavan about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. They were on 10th Canto around when Krishna's going to school, Sandamani's school. And he's, so they're back at 1st Canto now, so that's been a while. They've gone through 11th and 12th Canto, so. And so there was a purport there I was going to go to class on, so you prepare for I read the purport, and then I got Sarstha Darshini, I have that, and I looked at that, and the purports were identical. It's almost like copy and paste, except for the purport, the paragraphs were reversed, which is nothing wrong with it. It's fine, but it's the fact that, okay, this is Sanatan Goswami's purport. There's a verse coming up here in Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't know if maybe you haven't done it yet. Were they quoting Prabhupada in the purport? But basically, the purport is like a copy and paste from Krishna book. You took that paragraph and took it and put it in, which is nice. So in this way we see that there's authorized work done on the previous acharyas. Oftentimes it's just grammar mistakes, and if you read these books, you'll see where they correct the grammar in some of these books. Because typically when you're handwriting these books and copying them, handwriting them, oftentimes whoever's doing the copying might make a mistake. And so then the acharyas later correct it. So we're so fortunate. If you look at our disciplic succession, it's a shiksha line, but these are some amazing personalities. The intellectual capacity of these individuals is, and this begins with, it begins with the 6 Goswamis, which is Jiva Goswami is one of them, but it begins with him. He became the tattva. He took all this work, and then he became the acharya after Sanatan and Nityananda. Sanatan and Rupa Goswami left. When Sanatan left his body, he lived at Govardhan, and he's got his Bhajan Kutir there, and I assume it's the same one as 500 years ago. I don't know if it's it's around the Manasagam. I'm sure you've been there, and but he took his body and he brought it to Vrindavan and he put it in Samadhi at the Radha Damodar temple, which he was had it constructed. That's his temple, and that's where his Samadhi is also. So he did quite a number of literatures on his own, and there's a few of them, and I will. There's a number of them that are, quite a bit of them that are available. He did there's one book is Radha Krishna, Archana Chandrika, and then there's the Madhava Mahotsha, which is a work describing the coronation ceremony of Radha when she was given the position of a queen. And he has Gopal Tapani, Upanishad, Sri Sankalpa, Kalpa Vriksha, Digdarshini is his commentary on the Brahma Samhita. These are all books that, like Bhanu Swami, and is available, and his commentary on the Bhakta Rasamrita Sindhu. That's a book that is available. And Ujjala Nilamani he's got a commentary on that book. Lochan is a commentary on Rupa Goswami's Ujjala Nilamani. Adi Purnasta, Gayatri Vyasa, this is Bhasha. It's his commentary on the Gayatri Mantra. It's a very, very small book. That's another book that Bhanu Swami has done. And he got his Lagu Vaishnav Toshani, as we were talking about, his commentary on the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Lagu. And then Sanatan is the Brihad Vaishnav Toshani. His is the big commentary, and Jiva's is a small commentary. And then he's got the Gopal Champu. This is a very very nice literature that he wrote. It's about Krishna's pastimes, and there's two parts: his Vrindavan pastimes and his pastimes in Mathura. Very, very sweetly done. And then he's got Sandarbhas. He's got the 6 Sandarbhas. These are the really conclusive truth. This is where he has actually taken the commentaries of a lot of literature, but primarily the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's categorized all this information and categorized it in of Sambandhana, Abhideya, and Prayoja, divided it primarily in those 3. So you got the Tattva Sandarbha, the Bhagavat Sandarbha, the Paramatma Sandarbha, and the Krishna Sandarbha. These make up Sambandhana, the relationship. And then the Bhagavat Sandarbha is the process. So all these verses from different commentary, verses from different literatures, he organized them in this way. And then there's the Priti Sandarbha, which means love, which is the goal. And then later, what his disciples did, they took all this, and then all the commentaries that he did on his work on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they put it back into what's called the Krama Sandarbha. So that's his Srimad Bhagavatam commentaries, the entire Bhagavatam. But if you read it, I have these books also, they only put in there the verses that he made a commentary on. So if you read a chapter, it might have typically 38 verses, and they might have 10, 15, because they skip all the verses. So it's kind of hard to read it in a sense that if you want to see the story, that the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's not complete in that way. So that's Jiva Goswami's contribution. And so it says that he left around 1596. I don't. And then his tomb was at the Radha Damodar temple. So that's Jiva Goswami's. A little bit. Want to save some time and kind of feel like I was rushing through it, but we have, when we're talking a little bit about Vamanadev here also. So now, Vamana is a dwarf incarnation of the Lord. And so there's some little bit of back history, before the reason why he appeared is that the demigods and the demons are always battling. There's always wars going on between the two, and occasionally each one gets the upper hand. This makes up almost the entire 8th canto. Almost the majority of the 8th canto is taken up with this story of Bali Maharaj and the demons and battling the demigods and Indra. Indra's always kind of worried about his position, as being the king, and anybody ever threatens that position, he deals with him. Even Prithvi Maharaj, he worried about him taking over, so he steals the horse from Prithvi Maharaj. And then Krishna's dominance. And so we see quite often he's insecure. This is a nature of management. So in chapter 11 of the 8th canto, there's a battle in which the demigods, they get the upper hand. And once they get the upper hand in a war, it turns into a rout at one point. And it's really, it's hard to even imagine. We wouldn't want anybody to go through it, of fighting. But once the mentality it requires to fight like this, and then to get into an upper hand, they actually had to be stopped by Brahma and Indra. I'm not Brahma, but Narada had to actually stop Indra from fighting because he just about annihilated all the demons, including Bali Maharaj. But they stopped him, and they took what was left. They brought the demons back to their planets, and Sukacharya, which is their spiritual master, brought Bali Maharaj back to life and the other demons. And then Bali Maharaj does a sacrifice. He performs a sacrifice to get power. What everybody, there's always some meaning to do some sacrifice. Like, Kamsa and Hiranyakasipu, and they all, to achieve the power they have, they perform a lot of sacrifice. So Bali Maharaj performs this Vishvachi Yagna, and he received all these benedictions of chariots, various kinds of paraphernalia, fighting weapons. He became so powerful that he, in turn, attacked the demigods. And then when he was so powerful that they didn't even put up a fight. They just left. They just vacated the heavenly planet. And they just realized the futility of it, that we're not going to win this battle. And so he took over the heavenly planet. So now Aditi, her son's out. The other people are in charge. And she wants to reverse the situation. She wants her sons back, Indra's her son, back on the throne. So she performs a sacrifice, and she wants to perform, a sacrifice. So she approaches her husband, and he explains to her exactly what she needs to do in order to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead be her son. And so she performs this sacrifice, and at one point, Vishnu he appears before Kashyapa, who is her husband. And when he appeared before him, then he entered into his heart. And then once Kashyapa knew he was entered his heart, then he passed his semen on to Aditi and transferred the Lord to Aditi. So she observed these vows, and then eventually they gave birth to Vamanadev. He appeared as a four-armed form of Vishnu. If in the story, like even in Gopakumar in the Brihad Bhagavatam Lecture, when Gopakumar visits, you visit the planet of the heavenly planets, Vishnu is there. Vamanadev is there in his four-armed form. That's what you see. If he chooses to be in his form as Vamanadev, that's he could do. But particularly, that's what he saw, the four-armed form of Vamanadev. So they had this ceremony, birth ceremony of Vamanadev. And they gave him his sacred thread at that time. Lord Brahma was there. Of course, all the Indras there, all the sages, they came, and they honored Vamanadev. He had his, wore a deer skin. He had his sacred thread, which he was recognized as being a Brahmin. He had a danda, and he carried a water pot. What's it, Kamandu? Or I forgot the name of it. But Kamandala. So it's a water pot. So at this point, he after they finished giving him his birth ceremony, actually after he appeared in his four-armed form, and then he immediately changed into Vamanadev. After they saw, and after they understood exactly who he was, he changed into Vamanadev. So then he heard that there was a sacrifice going on nearby. And so he goes to the sacrificial arena of Bali, Maharaj Bali. And actually, before he gets there, he actually exhibits his Brahman effulgence to all these demigods and to Brahma and all this. This unbelievable effulgence, an aura that he had. He exhibited that before he left. Now he goes to this sacrifice arena, and he approaches this arena, and they see this effulgence coming before they even recognize who is actually there. They see that this effulgence is approaching them, and he comes there, and Bali recognizes that he's a Brahmin, and he gives him a proper reception, and he asked him. He says that he gives him respect as a Brahmin, And then he asked if he would like a benediction. In the 18th chapter, it says, Bali says, "O son of a Brahmin, it appears that you have come here to ask me for something. Therefore, whatever you want, you may take from me, O best of those who are worshipful. You may take from me a cow, gold, a furnished house, palatable food and drink, the daughter of a Brahmin for your wife, prosperous villages, horses, elephants, chariots, or whatever else you desire." So as a king, he was able to give him these benedictions. Well, not these aren't benedictions, but give him these material things. Similarly, in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya are going to Advaitacharya's house. Lord Chaitanya heard that Advaitacharya was speaking Vaimad philosophy, which Advaita did on the pretext to try to get the Lord to stop giving him so much respect. He wanted to be the servant of the Lord. But they passed this house, and Lord Chaitanya said, "Well, who lives in this house here?" And Nityananda said, "Oh, that's a Grihastha sannyasi." And so Lord Chaitanya said, "Well, we should go and meet this sannyasi. We need to go in there and meet him." So they went in there, and the sannyasi, invited him into his home, and they were actually had some fruit, and they took some rest in there, and then the sannyasi gave him a benediction, similarly like this: "May you have, a nice wife, nice wealth, nice all these material things." And Lord Chaitanya said, "These aren't blessings. If you want to give blessings, you should bless someone that they will be a devotee of Krishna, that they can worship Krishna, they glorify Krishna." But then the sannyasi, Grihastha sannyasi, which is kind of funny because during the day he would go out and collect and do the pick basically and collect money, and come back he would be with his wife. He would pretend to be a sannyasi. But the Lord was very merciful to this sannyasi. He went to his house, even though we're not going to get too much on the story, but the story is in there because Lord Chaitanya gives no mercy to those who blaspheme devotees. But someone who's like this cheater, because he wasn't a blasphemer of devotees, he gave his mercy to this person. So that's the purport of that story. So here we have Baladev asking Vamanadev any one of these things, which was the thing at the very end. He says, "Or whatever you desire." He left it. He opened it up right then. So Vamanadev, actually Bali Maharaj is checked by his guru, Sukacharya. He said, no, you got to be careful. This is really the Supreme Personality of God. This is Vishnu in disguise. That you should recant what you said. And he says that he explained that in subduing others, in joking, in responding to danger, in acting for the welfare of others, one can refuse to fulfill one's promise. There would be no fault in that. And so by this philosophy, Sukacharya tried to dissuade Maharaj from granting. Bali Maharaj says that I just want 3 paces of land. And so Vamanadev just asked for 3 paces of land, and Bali Maharaj agreed to that. Sukacharya knew that this was the end for him. But Bali Maharaj, one quality he had was truthfulness. Even though he was considered a demon, he was from a demon family. Actually, his grandfather was Prahlad. So he had true, and so he responded to Sukacharya. Well, it's better if this is even if you're right, it's better for me to be honest than dishonest. This is a virtue. That if I'm dishonest, then I'm going to the repercussions of that dishonesty are far more worse than what possibly he could do. So he understood that was one thing, to have. He wanted to maintain his honor in that way. So Lord Vamanadev then immediately extended himself into the entire universe. And he showed Bali his universal form. Bali Maharaj was able to see the universal form of him. He was able to see that he was Lord Vishnu. And he saw him holding in all his arms, hands, the chakra, the lotus flower, the club, and the I said lotus flower, chakra, club, and conch shell. So he was able to see all these things. And he knew then that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so, Prabhupada, in the purport there, I think the last purport on text 34, he said, the Lord kicked a hole in the covering of the universe. Then the water of the Ganges came into this material world to deliver all the fallen souls. And so, because of the power of this water, Lord Shiva took it first upon his head, which would minimize the power. We got a water problem downstairs. We got a small water problem, It's just a little water problem, Here we have, but it drives us nuts, Where's this problem coming from, Here we have the Lord kicking a hole in the universe, and but Lord Shiva has protected the universe by first taking it upon his head. But then this water is there to deliver the living entities. So then when Bali Maharaj was deprived all of his possessions, after the Lord took 2 steps, he took it all. He had no place to put his 3rd step. So all the demons were very angry at this point. And Bali Maharaj tried to get them to settle down, but they didn't listen. So a battle ensued, a huge battle with Vishnu. And here in this verse, we also, we have Jai and Vijay also fighting with him. And when it's the story of Mohini Murti when they churn in the ocean of milk, and then there's a battle also with the demons and devotees. There's also in there's a description where Jai and Vijay also come and they assist the Lord in that battle. So they got some regular they show up more often, just not in the story of Hiranyakashipu and Ranraksha as demons. They're always serving the Lord in different capacities. So they're defeated. So at this point, understanding, Garuda's there. He understands the purpose of the Lord. But just by understanding him, Garuda arrests Bali Maharaj with the ropes of Varuna. And then Bali Maharaj was thus reduced to a helpless position. Lord Vishnu then asked him, where do I put my 3rd step? He's been arrested. He has nothing at that point. He's taken everything away. And he said that because Lord Vishnu appreciated Bali Maharaj's determination and integrity, when Bali Maharaj was unable to fulfill his promise, Lord Vishnu ascertained that from the place for him would be the planet Sutala, which would be better than other planets in heaven. So he decided he would take him there. So Bali Maharaj had nothing else to offer him, but he offered him his head. When he bowed to him, and it's for the 3rd place. So the Lord, they took him to this planet, and they imprisoned him. And then the Lord promised to be his doorkeeper. And he also had chakra to defend him. And then Bali Maharaj gives, in chapter 22, there's quite a number of prayers to the Lord. He offers him all types of prayers. And in his prayers, at that point, he gives him his head in charity. So, at one point, even Prahlad Maharaj, he shows up, and he's glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prahlad is, as we mentioned, is the grandfather of Bali Maharaj, who is Prahlad Maharaj is a pure devotee. So he says, the grandfather, he described how the Supreme Personality of Godhead made this whole arrangement just to trick Bali Maharaj for the purpose of, for his benefit. He took away everything he had to get him to surrender. And Prabhupada, he oftentimes would quote, that use that example, how Krishna would, if he really, really likes you, That's kind of hard sometimes, to think that you take away everything. Krishna knows everybody's heart. He knows what's necessary for each individual for their surrender, what their process of devotional practice, what they need at any particular time. And there's going to be a time when this actually will happen to each one of us. It'll be, if it's necessary, if it's that much of a hindrance of us, if it's that much of a wall and we can't get past it, then Krishna or his representatives will knock that wall down if it's that big of an impediment for the devotee's advancement. So we also often think of, just surrender, Prabhu. That's like almost like a slogan. Just depend on Krishna. That's like a slogan that we hear devotees often. But that's actually a very lofty position. When one says just depend on Krishna, if you really want to think about that and try to analyze what that means, it's very lofty. It's ultimately, you have nothing. You've given up everything. You've walked away from everything. That's a pretty difficult thing to do. And Narada Muni experienced that. And one of the first things, just depending on Krishna, you have to overcome fear. That's a huge thing that everybody has to deal with. Because Narada Muni, when he got the benediction of the association of Vaishnavas, and when he set off on his own when his mother had passed away, he says that the very first thing he had to deal with was fear. But once he got to the point where he was completely dependent on Krishna, it really changed his life. Everything changed at that point for him when he was completely dependent. It's difficult because maybe in India, where you have a culture, a varnashram system, there's a system set up to support sadhus as they travel and they go to holy places. It's customary for, say, to feed a sadhu and to show respect for a sadhu, maybe give shelter for a night to a sadhu. Of course, in the West, we don't have that system, so it's very difficult. It's difficult to think that you could just walk out of your house, leave your car behind, your possessions behind. Right now, it's even probably the most difficult thing to leave behind is your phone, your cell phone. That's got to be the most difficult, because in Krishna conscious now, the first thing you find out when you come to the temple, what's the first thing you want? What's the Wi-Fi password? When you go, what's the Wi-Fi password? You go to a temple, what's the Wi-Fi? Or you go to somebody's house, if you're staying there for a linear period of time, the first thing you want. So that's probably the most difficult thing to walk away from, is ultimately, Krishna takes everything. Bali Maharaj had nothing at this point. But he still had himself. He still had himself. And so he offered himself, his head. So this is the complete ultimate surrender. He offered everything, your body, your minds, and your words at this point. Even when you offer your obeisances, as described in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. And most of the things I get from a Hari Bhakti Vilas, I don't read it. I get it from other books, where they're like Bhaktisiddhanta or somebody, they'll quote things that you shouldn't be holding anything in your hand when you offer your obeisances, because offering your obeisances is a form of surrender. You're not holding anything back, my phone, your bead bags typically could be either hanging on your neck. If you watch, Prabhupada is considered the acharya that he set by example. And you can even see videos of Prabhupada offering those obeisances. And he never had, whatever he had in his hand, his cane or whatever he handed to somebody. When he offers his obeisance, he laid down and prostrated. He laid right on, his bead bag would be on his neck, and he would lay right on his bead bag. His beads were in a bag. That's what the bag is for, to keep the beads clean. So when you're surrendering, it's a process of practice. It's mechanical, because we do it so many times. There's no time. Maharaj, how many times in a lifetime, 50 years, have you offered your obeisances, It's incalculable. This is one of those things that's just you just can't calculate. But none of it has gone unnoticed. Every time anybody offers their obeisances, Krishna knows, because he's in the heart. And that's all part of the surrendering process. And this ultimate story here is the process that he was forced to surrender, but due to arrogance, he didn't have to offer the last bit what he had. And you see that sometimes with individuals. Just kill me. They'll just go down dying. They'll just, and we see that there was something in Bali Maharaj that he was able to come to his senses at one point of his life and surrender the last little bit that he had, which is his body, his mind, and his words. Okay, I think maybe I probably made some mistakes or something. Maybe somebody can add something to it. Today's 2 very great days. Jiva Goswami's one of the 6 Goswamis, amazing Vaishnava. A lot of his literary works, I think the biggest is probably the Sandarbhas. That's one of his biggest works. And even that we have translations by. Gopi Pranadhana started it, but we have different, Kushakrata's got his translation, and then Bhanu Swami's also done the translations. And Prabhupada mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's in the purport, he says that you're going to get all these books. These Sandarbhas, he lists them. These are coming. They're all coming. Prabhupada knew that this wasn't going to stop. He saw how important the works of the Goswamis. So he foresaw that premonition there in the Chaitanya. Of course, in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the very first purport, Srila Prabhupada lists the commentaries of different acharyas that we should read and become familiar with. This is in the very first purport of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So there's so much information out there, there's so much literature. There's more than we can assimilate in a lifetime. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga.
Govindam Adi Purusham